Document, right, to do with the returning officer for the Kirklees elections, right? But it doesn't actually tell you who the returning officer is. At least when they're doing the elections for Parliament, it tells you who it is. Like the Gorton and Denton one was the executive of Manchester Council, and it actually put his name there, right? And his contact details. They've got an email address. Now they're getting also the returning officer in here is called the RO, right? But it doesn't tell you their name yet. And I've looked at several documents, and they're talking about changing the boundaries on some of these local wards and areas, right? And you've got all these correspondences from school teachers, but also many councillors talking about whether they agree on the changes or not. And they're talking all very kind of like, professional in this document. And yeah, it doesn't tell you who the returning officer is. There's an email address, right? I've got my poll card through now, but we've got, to do with Kirklees Council, right? I've put actually a criminal complaint in, a serious criminal complaint that I had to go and swear an oath on, right, at the solicitors, because there definitely is criminality in what happened to our ancient site and a continuation of the council to work with criminals, right, who weren't criminally punished, and they actually are serious offences. Now, I don't think Kirklees Council is a legitimate council, because you know what happened to George Galloway when he stood in the elections? They took all his election material down. They sent someone around to take it down. I've never thought Kirklees Council is a legitimate council. They've got some good councillors, right? But a lot of them aren't really keen to talk to people, yet you'll see them even going out of their way to walk around with some residents, like, Andrew Cooper, the Green Party. He doesn't really speak to me or correspond with me at all, yet I'm quite interested in, protecting the green area. And yet you'll see him with an entourage. He'll go around with all these ladies and entourage. There are some people in life who you can socially click with and others that you can't, right? And that's, when it comes to democracy, it's unfair, right? When you have these, old ladies going around, these, knitting club, cake baking ladies who all get along with each other, it's like they're commanding the councillor, and they've got him going around, giving them the entourage like the red carpet out, but yet other people get neglected, right? And we're meant to have 3 councillors for each area, right? And I usually talk to the councillor who's in the next area, right? Not ours, because I've had quite a few run-ins with these councillors. If you fall out with the councillors, you're screwed. You don't have a representative, right? Because then you actually have grievances with them. And the men have taken oath not to hold any grievances, right? But, for example, here we've got this Bill Armour, right? I've seen Bill Armour he came around doing some canvassing for Simon Reevell, right? When he was doing his when Simon Reevell was the MP. We could actually do with Simon Reevell now, to be honest. I could do with talking to a barrister who's an MP, right? But they've changed all the boundaries since then anyway, and I didn't get to speak to Mark Eastwood because they locked everyone down in the pandemic, right? And I was actually booked in to meet him. But you got this councillor Bill Armour knocking around, right? I've spoke to him I've spoke to him once or twice, right? And he's very, very well. He sounds like me, like he's local, and he's not been to private school or anything. But on these documents, look at him here, Councillor Bill Armour, right? Eminently sensible options to which I have no objection, right? So he's throwing in these words like eminently and so forth, right? When you ring him up on the phone and you've got a problem, right? He's literally like, he talks like I'm talking now, right? He's very broad Yorkshire, working class accent, right? And he's just like, like that, he's not, he doesn't sound, now maybe this is like me, in a way similar to me when I do writing, I'm doing petitions to Parliament and quite serious, important legal stuff now, right? And when I'm talking, maybe I might not convey that, but to whatever extent I fail to convey myself through my linguistics, right, I definitely make up with on paper. But Bill Armour is like, that differentiation is expanded even more. So, like, on paper, look at this. Eminently sensible options to which I have no objection. He sounds like he's just walked straight out of, Parliament or something like that, as if he's some sort of clerk. But when you ring him up, it couldn't be the more opposite, right? And then when I was talking to him about speaking to, like, the other councillor in the local area, right, this is his response, like, oh, what do you want to talk to her for? Like, what the hell? What kind of response is that? What kind of response from a councillor is that kind of language and response? I mean, when he's coming across with these, eminently sensible options to which I have no objection sort of stuff, they're very crafty and coy, these councillors. When you speak to them, right, and you want something dealing with or talking to, right, they go into, like, they've got a switch button, and they go into potato mode, right, and this is not all councillors, I'm talking about this Bill Armour guy now, right, he goes into, like, thick mode, so it's like literally licking a window, like, he pretends that he's thick, so that he can't do anything. Oh, I can't do it, there's no I can do like that, right? And then the next minute, he flicks a switch, he's in Councillor Bill Armour, eminently sensible options of which I have no objection, right? And he's engaging in all these documents and letters and, changing the boundaries and doing all this technical stuff and such, right? I mean, at one point, one of the councillors, I was talking about getting a style or wall fixed, and it was a route of way, and they said, oh, it's not, the council doesn't own the land, so we can't pay for it. But yet, when I looked at the actual law and legislation, it said that the council doesn't have to own the land. If there's a right of way passed or through it, then they have a joint responsibility in the upkeep of it financially as well, right? So I was right about that. Stuff like that. I've been engaged with Parliament, right, probably for the last sort of 10 years, and even increasingly more involved with Parliament, telephoning MPs or leaving messages with MPs and sending petitions into Parliament and getting involved in, what laws are being made and changed, like, Assisted Dying Act, or like the Lammy's trying to take these juries away, or whatever it is, and trying to sort out this petitions service, which is the main thing, and sorting our privileges out. No one's doing private bills, not even the companies, not even the independent private companies are doing private bills and making use of the privileges. Not that they need to, they've got enough money where they don't even need to, because they can just afford lawyers to act for them all the time. Most of those processes were put into acts of law, so the process is dealt with within an act of law rather than doing a private bill. If you want to oppose a railway now, apparently, you don't oppose the railway through a private bill and petition against it. It's all within the act. Certain applications and objections are within the act itself, so you're not using the main court of Parliament, but you can still do private bills, and really that's making use of the privileges. But if no one's doing it and no one's using them, and no one's really doing the paper petitions either, there's only 50 to 250 a year, no one's really using that law or making use out of it. I'm really one of the only people who is bothering to try and use it. Yet they invented e-petitions from 2006, and then suddenly you've got this boom because people are able to do it online and engage online, and then the figures went back up again into the thousands, when it was literally 50 to 250 per session from the last decade. It was getting back into the thousands again, but they're rejecting the majority of them. So those thousands are only an extreme minority. The figures now that there's online, it's actually reinvigorated it again. So the true figures are like it was in the 1800s when there were tens of thousands a session, right? But it's not showing that in the sessional returns because they're rejecting them all. So they've revived it, but revived it without the true rights and privileges, and revived it by rejecting them all. So the figures don't even come out to the true figures like they did. And, they don't even want to write anything in their journals other than, petition was ordered to lie on the table, right? You don't even know who it's from. So there's all these things to sort out, and there's the Human Rights Act things to sort out as well. So I haven't been really engaged with the local council. I haven't really had much or anything to do with the local council, right, most of my life. And when I have more recently, I don't like what I've found. The councillors definitely seem not impartial. A lot of them seem to be taking sides. If you go around the whole neighbourhoods and do leaflets everywhere to try and get everyone on your side for something, they panic, the councillors. They're like, oh, you're getting everyone on, then they start going on social media and firing off, which they're not meant to do actually. And some of these people are still on the council. I don't like local councils. Whenever I've grown up, anything that I've ever liked or loved, they seem to pass planning and destroy it or demolish it or change it. They're actually our local council are not like councils in the Cotswolds or in the south when they really cherish, value and love the area. Most of the councillors around here don't like the area. They want to constantly redevelop and change it, always going for better, better. Oh, they can always do better, they can always do better, they can always do better the whole time. They're never content and satisfied with anything. And then they're always saying they've got no money, but all the government keeps popping up these money pots. And they end up doing things for the sake of it when nothing actually needed doing. And anyway, I don't like this Councillor Bilama guy. I think he's a charlatan, a con man, because he pretends he's stupid when you need him, and then if you end up getting an argument with him, then you're screwed. Because then if you actually get onto if you actually end up falling out with them, you're screwed, particularly if you have disputes, because then I think that when they're doing the voting and things like that, they're your opponent then, and really, if you're not Labour, if you're opposite to Labour, you're an opponent anyway, right? This is why you're meant to have 3 different councillors in each area on the model, but they all tend to be Conservatives in our area, they're all sort of like team players. But anyway, what's the point in this video? The point in this video is this. I've been trying to find the identity of the returning officer, but it's not telling you it. Oh, and another thing, our area, it never had counterfoils. Whenever you voted and put your tick in a box, it was just a piece of paper with the boxes printed on it. You never had all these special counterfoils with the numbers on, right? And ever since I was like a teenager and I started voting, it's always been like that, right? And then when I ended up getting into the law and reading the law, I found out in the Representation of the People Act, you've got to have those counterfoils on. And I'm like, hey, that's funny. They never had the numbers. Like, both sheets have to have the same, identifying number on the council's copy and your copy you put in the box, right? And they never had them. And that was one of the first election law things that I learned, and I called in and complained about it, and then suddenly, magically, they started appearing with the special professional counterfile things on. So I think that, our local elections in Labour had been pretty much cheated and rigged for the last decade until I called it out. So that's another thing, right? And then you've got the whole Castle Hill scandal with the criminality in it. And now we've got poll cards through again, and, nationally, Labour are doing terrible, and Labour have had control of our council for a very long time. It's been a solid Labour area, right? But the new party that's coming in to oppose them reform are all going on the back of Nigel Farage and the whole cheating with, talking pints that he cheated to get popular, and they're all copying all the material online, right? Now, I checked the Green Party, and they've got all these Green Party vote Green signs, and they have it's very hard to see, like, they're meant to have certain information on the front of every single advertisement or sign or notice is meant to have, like, information on it, and it didn't look like they did, but when you actually find a high-resolution picture and zoom in, you can see it on there, but there are some that don't have it. And actually, Carla Denyer actually had one. She's got one on her Facebook page that doesn't have the information on it anyway. But it's not that. It's the fact that the online digital element is that when these official pages and groups put their material up, it's meant to be view only, right? And if you copy and write save it, that's copyright, but for fair use to keep at home. But as soon as you re-upload that somewhere else on the internet, you are publishing it and making a copy. And then that it has to have the identifier on it. Now, if you post it on your Facebook, it identifies you because it's got your name on your profile, right? But you aren't authorised to do it. You're doing it independently, right? And you're not an authorised agent. So, and they're not accounting for how many people are, copying them. So it is widespread piracy. And the Electoral Commission, I don't think they're going to do anything about it. Even the MPs have all got election materials still on their Facebook, and their Facebook is put as an official contact method on Parliament. So next to the phone number and postal address. Now, if you ring them up on the telephone and they're putting on election adverts while you're listening to them, there's something extremely wrong with that. There's something very, very, very wrong with that, right? people would complain, particularly if they were from the opposite party, and their MP was on the opposite party. They wouldn't like that if the House of Commons telephone service had election adverts. So there's something they've rushed ahead with social media quicker than they were supposed to do. And Nick Clegg knew that when he was talking to Mark Zuckerberg in his interview when he was Facebook president. He knew that they were rushing ahead with the social media, and a lot of it was not lawful, right? So, what is the point of this video? Is that I'm looking for the electoral returning officer. I haven't found their name yet, and they only want to say returning officer. RO, and refer to it as the title, not the name. I want to know who it is. And I want to put a complaint in about all this online copyright, particularly from the Reform UK groups, because it's not lawful. It's all copyright violation, and it's widespread. And I don't think that these are free and fair elections. Now in here they're talking about, I received a representation from so-and-so, or I received a representation for so-and-so, right? They're always talking about, I received a representation from the school teacher. Right, it's an official representation, so I'll be making an official representation. I will be making an official representation to the returning officer. So I want to know who the returning officer is. I mean, on the actual electoral card, it says the returning officer issued this card. No way. Well, how do you contact them? Who are they, you get electoral.registration@kirklees.co.uk, right? Well, I want to know who the returning officer is. What's wrong with it saying that, for Manchester it's Tom Stannard? What's wrong with that? It's Tom Stannard. Well, so what, right? It's Tom Stannard. What's the problem, right? Why is it Kirklees Council are very mercurial about who the returning officer is, right? I can tell the Kirklees Council electoral services that I have been thoroughly engaged with the Electoral Commission continuously for the last probably 12 months or longer, right? I was the person who called out our local area for not having the foils on the tickets. I'm quite sure other areas around here didn't. Kirklees Council are not a legitimate authority. I've got a criminal complaint against them with legal services and the police, a legitimate criminal complaint anyway, right? They're under threat from reform now, the very serious threat from reform, and there's 12 councillors are meant to be saying they're standing down or not standing in a seat again, right, which is still not many because you get 3 councillors for each area. So, I mean, if there were 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's like, only enough councillors for 4 of the areas, right, if 12 are standing down. When they go onto the podium and announce the winner, right, whether it's a parliamentary election or local, right, when they've got the police officer there, and when the returning officer reads out the declaration, I declare that this has been a free and fair election, right, that is a false statement. It is not true. Because what is happening online, digitally, on the internet, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on X, on Threads, on Blue Sky, right, is that people are doing something called right-click save. Right-click save. And they're going on Photoshop and they're making their pictures and images and they're using, sometimes Labour, sometimes Conservative, but now more so Reform. And they're making their own little pictures and they're doing something called publishing it, right? Publish means in the Representation of the People Acts and the rest of the law for elections and referendums, to make available to the public or a section of the public at large in whatever form or whatever means. Well, that's digital means, right? Not paper or not placard or not like banner, vinyl banner or whatever. It's digitally. To make available to the public or a section of the public digitally, right? Digitally. Now, that is a criminal offence because when it's done like en masse widespread, for again, you need to understand, copyright law applies to everything, including elections. Now, you can only supposed to get election material from authorised agents and have your own copy. Once you get your own copy at home, you cannot run it off a printing press, right? Because you aren't authorised to do that. You can't print off your own at home and hand them out. You've been given your copy, however they gave you it, right? Whether they gave it for free or you bought it off them, however, right? If you copy something, right, whether it's online from their website or wherever, and you put it on your wall at home, that is what we call fair use, right? Now, if you put a stand outside on the pavement, like, and print off 20,000 of them and start either giving them or selling them, like some kids' lemonade stand, you are not using it for your own personal private use in the house, right? Now, if you're selling them, you're making money, right? That's piracy. And if you're giving them away for free, you're not doing it for your own picture in your own house on the wall. You're doing it to, and you might not be selling them for a financial profit like piracy, but you're giving them out because you intend people to vote for that party. So it's been put to an effect, right? Which is not just your fair use effect in the house, right? It's been doing to have an effect on persons, right? And that effect is at the poll booths, which is, it might as well be financial gain. Well, you could do both. If you were selling Reform t-shirts, you're making money, you don't have authorised use of the logo, and you're encouraging people to vote for Reform. It's to the benefit of the party and financial benefit to you. And even if you gave them away and it's not financial benefit to you, you're doing it for the party. It's still piracy because it's not fair use. And this is all over the internet now. The Electoral Commission know there's something wrong, right? They've got a page where you can upload items, you can upload, like, photographs from the internet and, you know, tell them where you saw it. But it's everywhere. It's like there are people have made their own little fan club groups. Some of them are posing as official Reform UK groups, but Reform UK are definitely not putting all of them down in notional or implied spending, right? And every person who goes onto the Reform page or an official Reform group and then saves anything and then shares it is publishing, right? Even using the share button on the internet is republishing it using not Reform's resources. It's using your own mobile phone, which you had to buy, that costs money, and you've got a phone contract or you won't be able to connect. If you go into McDonald's, right, they've got free internet, right? If you walk out to the middle of a field and you haven't paid your mobile phone contract, you cannot go on that Reform website and view it, right? And you definitely can't save the images unless you've paid money. And everyone who pays money, that's an extra resource. And Reform UK aren't paying for everyone's connection. It's actually a nightmare, right? And it is affecting this local election in this local area because there are loads of unauthorised Reform groups and members in there reposting things in local groups. It's actually a nightmare. To get evidence of all of it, right, needs a general statement that it exists. And I'm making that general statement now. This is a representation. The returning officer received a representation from, the schoolmaster, Dalton School. The representation said this or that, right? This is a representation, right? Now, I can put it in writing and go into the solicitors and swear it on oath and put it in an affidavit and lay it on the table, right? And if the returning officer does not investigate it and walks up onto that podium and says this was a fair and free election, then we've got serious problems, right? I'm not going to save every single specimen that I've seen, right, and upload it to the Electoral Commission because there are hundreds, actually thousands. And when it's so widespread, there is even a clause in the Representation of the People Act called widespread election interference, right? When something's so extensive that the evidence is mountainous, right, you need to put it in a general statement, and this is my general statement, I'm saying it now, the entire internet is full of Reform UK interference, illegal copyright and piracy of Reform logos and images, which haven't been put down in Reform UK notional spending or implied spending, and which people are making use out of mobile phone contracts, or they wouldn't even be able to even turn their phone on and see anything, right? Every single mobile phone has a contract. Reform UK did not pay for those mobile phone contracts. They did not pay for the internet connection on Sky. They haven't bought their mobile phones for people to use to even look at it. They haven't bought the Photoshop programs for it to use, right? None of that. And I am kind of sick of it. And really, Keir Starmer had wanted to call the elections off, What needs to happen is that no one's actually speaking about this. They're not talking about it on Calendar News. They're not talking about it on Loose Women. They're not talking about it on Breakfast TV. No one's admitted the truth, right? No one's talking about the law of it, which is that the statement needs to be made to the public by the council or electoral commission or returning officers or whoever that the public should be aware. Because this is what they're doing on the poll cards. They're making the public aware there's going to be an election, right? The public and the police need to make a statement, and they need to inform the public that it's not lawful to copy election material, right, which is Class E material, for anything other than fair use, which is personal use in this context, to put on their own wall in their house, and probably not even in their window, because it has an effect on the elections, right? They're not allowed to make copies of it online or physical, which are going to be used to affect the election. Now, if you copy it or make a copy, right, for you to look at in your house, that is a fair use Copyright Act use. Now, there is an exemption for privilege of Parliament. Well, this is not a parliamentary election either, right? But it's not the public business to Parliament, and it's not the private business to Parliament. Elections are not standing orders of Parliament in the public and private business. The law, usage, privileges and proceedings of Parliament in the scheme may, not since 1868, because Parliament doesn't hear election petitions anymore, right? So you can't have cases to Parliament. You can do they have got like a general widespread election interference. You can do a petition about it, and I've tried a few, but they're ignoring them, right? And there's this issue with the MPs having it on the website. But this is not a parliamentary election, though. That's for parliamentary elections, right? I think you can complain about local ones as well. But it's set up for the courts to do it with an election petition, right? But the police are meant to be making sure that it's done lawfully, but they're not, because they're not enforcing it online. The Electoral Commission, when they were created, were given powers to issue takedown notices, and they're meant to be. But it's happening so much that no one's reporting it hardly, and it's impossible for them to get everything taken down. And they know that it's not just one or two instances that you need to upload. They know it's widespread. So how do you solve that? Well, that's what the press are there for. Press releases, newspapers. When there's a murder, the police put an appeal in the newspaper. Has anyone seen this person? Every day of the week, the newspapers have got stories like, there's been this or that in the town centre, or the police are wanting people to watch out for this or that. Why are they not telling people about this election law and the fact that everyone's breaking it and it needs to stop, right? Nigel Farage, really, with his Talking Pints programme leading up to his election, someone should have challenged that with an election petition and said that Nigel Farage, has been shown in a way to make him popular, which has affected the outcome of his election, right? But they didn't, and no one challenged it. Nick Clegg, the Liberal was doing a radio show in Sheffield Hallam when he was running elections and no one called it out. It's £5,000 now, but the police are meant to enforce it and do something and get it under control, right? And also you don't need to have an election petition if the returning officer and police officer declare it wasn't a free and fair election, right? They've got the power to do it there and then when it's been reported, right? Not just the counting of the tickets and like people turning up at the polling stations all went well. They're not there just to say everything went smoothly here, only because the advertisements and promotional part of it is part of the proceedings of the election, right? It's part of the proceedings of the local election, right? And it's not free and fair. None of them are. None of them are free and fair because of Facebook. Facebook is making it not free and fair. I mean, I don't support the Labour Party at all, but they're going to get thrashed this time and they know it because of the online influence, right? And it's not lawful. And I have been taking away Parliament. I have been challenging Parliament on it, but I've been doing other things as well, like this assisted dying bill, which the Scottish Government have just voted against, and this taking the juries away, and trying to sort our rights and privileges out for petitioning and that e-petition service in government. I can't do everything at once, right? I did call out our area for not having those proper counterfoil numbers on the things, which they corrected. So I've actively affected our local area in elections by sorting out those ridiculous, literally they were like raffle ticket books they were using, close to raffle ticket books, pieces of paper, printed out with just a square box on that you tick with no identifying numbers or anything like that on the copy that you put in the box, right, to say that, it was you. I think that the Labour Party have been cheating for decades in our local area, and that's how they managed to make it solid Labour, but they're going to get beaten now. So I'm having to call out the opposition. I wouldn't support any of these parties. I am going to have to try to vote independent or whoever's on there who is not one of these big parties because they're all corrupt. So this is a communication to the returning officer, right? It is a representation from me, right? And, he has to, if he doesn't listen to it all, then he's not doing his job properly, right? The police need to tell people. And also, there's a Representation of the People Act 1949. 1948 got replaced by 1949. In that act, you're not allowed to show the candidates to the public, right, unless it's by means paid for by the election agent expenses. So that means that private people aren't meant to be doing political parodies when there's an election on, right? But yet they are doing. And the government haven't been bothered about that either. But they will be bothered when there's the next general election on because it's all going into en masse now and AI stuff and all kinds of things like that, right? So I've already noticed. So what is the main complaint for this area is this. It's clearly obvious that there is mass piracy and copyright violations of Reform UK material. The logo is copyrighted, right? The Reform UK logo. That is piracy. It's criminal. It's not a civil copyright. It's not a civil copyright when it's done extensively en masse. Now, if the Labour Party are going to lay down on their back and, sing of England while they get thrashed by Reform, when Reform have been cheating, well, that's their problem. But, I'm neither a supporter of Labour or Reform because the whole thing is corrupt, right? And Kirklees Council need to be facing criminal charges for that Ancient Sites and Monuments Act 1979 being violated by that Tandy Partnership, acted criminally, right? Tandy acted criminally. It wasn't a planning violation, it was a crime. And then when the building got condemned, there's a second crime because that condemnation declared it unsafe. Now, when something gets acted on without consent, under the Criminal Damage Act, it's a further offence when it's unsafe, when there's a public risk. So there's two crimes. Not only was it unauthorised action and damage to the site through the 1979 Archaeological Areas Act, it was then criminal damage, The council's order made it into criminal damage, affirmed it was criminal damage, because it was a danger at risk to the public, right? And then the council ordered it to be demolished, and they did. I don't think they got consent for that, and that's what I think made the third offence. And then, further to that, they continued to work with the tender partnership when they'd failed to, in the interest of justice, to get them criminally prosecuted, which is perverting the course of justice, and continued to accept planning applications from criminals that they'd failed to have convicted. So the whole thing's an absolute nightmare. And now we've got these elections and Reform UK. What's the point in replacing criminal councils, Labour, with more criminals? Reform, right? Why replace criminals with criminals? Because what we want is to stop people breaking the law. And the whole, standing on the podium, next to the podium, this is a free and fair election, is charades. It's a pretend charade act that it's all lawful. And if the council don't get some police action into the extent of copyright and piracy of Reform UK logos, images and materials, and even showing the candidate. You're not meant to be showing the candidate now. There's a candidate in Huddersfield with pink hair. He's got a pink streak in his hair. He's easily identifiable. All you have to do is type in on Facebook. Go onto Facebook, type Reform UK Huddersfield, and he's all over the place, right? In photographs everywhere, right? Now, when people are right-click saving that and re-uploading it and sharing it, there's further copyright. They're showing the candidate to the public through that wouldn't be possible without buying a mobile phone, paying for a contract, connecting it to the internet, going onto the site, saving it, and then using your mobile phone contract and phone, a device which costs thousands of pounds, to publish it, make it available to the public or a section of the public in whatever form or whatever means, without authorization, right? So the whole thing couldn't be worse. I'm probably going to have to go down to the vote polling station and hand an affidavit in. I think I might get an affidavit sworn in at the solicitors, right, with a crime report, and get my voting ticket and staple it to it, and with photographs of this guy with pink hair and people uploading him into other groups, and put it in the voting box, right? So when they're counting it, they go, "Oh, what's this? Oh, it's an affidavit, sworn document, a sworn accusation," right? Now, when the returning officer, right, is at the polling, at the count, when the police officer is at the count with the returning officer, right, and they're watching all the old ladies counting the tickets, the ballots, and there's one very strange one there, odd size, with something fastened to it, and they go, "We'll put this aside," because they have to count these spoiled ones or other ones, and they have to say what's the reason for it. And there is a Form N285 affidavit form, crime report, stapled to the voting ticket, with evidence on it, right, of a guy with pink hair in the elections, being copied all over the internet, right, in the area, on illegal reform fan club groups, right? And there's a sworn statement of crimes happening in that election, right? How is the returning officer going to declare it's a free and fair election? In fact, I will fill out an affidavit, right, against the returning officer, right, with his name on when I get it, because he don't even want to put his name on these polling cards or in this document we've got here, right? I am going to fill an affidavit in with that returning officer's name and the police officer, right? And I'm going to go down to that solicitor's and I'm going to get it sworn, and I am going to fill out a crime report that election is not free and fair, and that the returning officer, by name, and the police officer are criminals, right? Because they're failing to enforce the copyright of election material, or inform the public that they shouldn't be doing it, so people even know that it's a crime. And I'm going to that will be posted in the ballot box. It will be posted in the ballot box to my voting ticket, and it will be counted as spoiled, and the reason will be announced in that election on the record by that returning officer and that police officer, right? It's going to happen. That is going to happen this election in that ballot box, at that polling station, at that count of tickets, right? There is going to be an affidavit of criminal accusation this election time against that returning officer and that police officer for failing to enforce a free and fair election, and the promotion of the election, right, is criminal, because everyone is doing illegal copyright all over Facebook in this area. Reform UK Huddersfield groups and persons in the group then copying it onto their own pages and their own Facebook groups and other groups that they're in, and all kinds of groups. It's all over the place, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop, and Reform UK need to be criminally prosecuted, including their leader, Nigel Farage, needs to be criminally prosecuted, right? So I can tell you now, expect a criminal crime report sworn on oath by a solicitor's charged valid. Expect the returning officer and police officer to find it in this election in a ballot box with the spoiled ballots, and it be accounted for. The reason why it is spoiled is because it is a crime report against that returning officer and the police officer. You can go down to William Hills now and put your money on it now. The bet is on.